You are not the author of your life. You're the reader, turning the pages one day at a time, finding out what you did the same way everyone else does, by watching it happen. Something else holds the pen, and it chooses the easy thing at every fork, and it has been writing in your name for years. And the strangest part is that you've let it deliberately, because a life you never wrote is a life that can never be held against you. You won't believe that yet. You think the problem is discipline or focus or some system you haven't found. So watch what actually happens when you hand the pen over. You don't have to commit, and what you don't commit to, you can't be measured against. And what you can't be measured against can never be called a failure. That's the whole transaction, and it was never about the work. You're not avoiding the work. You're avoiding the verdict. Because the moment you pick up the pen and write the life you say you want, you become accountable for how it turns out. Right now, you aren't. Right now, the gap between who you are and who you could have been has no fingerprints on it, so it stays bad timing, it stays circumstance, it stays the way things went. You've been building a life you can disown, and it protects something. There's a version of you that is remarkable, the one who would have built the thing and become the person if you'd ever truly applied yourself. And as long as you never truly apply yourself, that version never has to be tested. That person stays perfect and untouchable and alive. Because the day you go all in is the day you risk meeting the one fact you've organized your entire existence to avoid, which is that you went all in and it wasn't enough, and the remarkable version was never real, so you don't go all in. You keep that person alive by keeping them untested. Protect the dream by refusing to risk it, and then you call the refusal patience. That's the fear underneath the fear. It was never failure, it was being seen by your own eyes, falling short of your own story. So you built a life where the test never arrives, not in some act of cowardice, but in 1,000 small actions that each felt like nothing. And it works. That is the unbearable thing about it. It works perfectly, and the bill comes so slowly that you never connect it to the choice. There is a man who wakes at 50 in a life he doesn't recognize, and when you ask him how it happened, he says it went so fast that it just sort of happened. He thinks he's describing time, but he's describing absence. Because to say it just happened is to admit he was never there for it, that the hand moved for 30 years, and he never once reached up and took it. He didn't lose the life he wanted, he declined it every day in exchange for never finding out what he was made of, and every single time it felt like nothing at all. You can feel the pen moving right now, that pull in you that wants this to stay interesting instead of turning true. That pull is the author. That is the thing that has been writing you. It asks nothing of you except that you keep watching while it works, and it is patient and it is relentless, and it fully intends to finish the book alone. So understand what's actually on the table. You think the choice is between trying and failing, or staying safe. It isn't. The remarkable version of you, the untested one you've guarded your whole life, that person doesn't get to live either way. That person was always going to die, and the pages were always going to run out. And the only thing you actually decide is how that person goes. That person can die as a fantasy you protected and never spent, found intact at the end of a life that merely happened to you. Or that person can die the only honorable way a dream can, used up, spent all the way down by someone who finally picked up the pen and signed their name to the page and found out. You thought the unwritten life was the safe one, when it was the only one that was ever guaranteed to be wasted. You want what they have, but you don't want what it cost them to get it. That's the trade you've been trying to make. You see the person doing the original thing, the one whose work has pulled the attention of millions. And you want it, not just the result, but the aura, the gravity, the way their name carries weight. So you watch them, you study them, you you start to shape your work in the direction of theirs. And that's the first step in a deal, where you trade the risk of standing alone for the comfort of standing behind someone who already proved it could be done. The deal feels rational. Why reinvent the wheel? Why be the one who's wrong in public when there's somebody right there who's already figured it out? So you copy. You don't call it copying, you call it influence, you call it inspiration, you call it research. But the work you're making is shaped by their work, structured around their structure, decorated with their unique style. You think you're shortcutting your way to what they have. What you're actually doing is making it impossible for you to ever have it. Because here's the first thing you've missed. You don't actually know if they're winning. You see a feed, a highlight reel, a curated front of house. You don't see behind the curtain. You don't see the panic at 3 a.m. about whether the whole thing collapses next quarter. The person whose career you're studying might be 6 months from breaking down. You'd never know. The version of them you're modeling yourself on is the version they chose to show you. And even if they are everything they appear to be, every bit as successful as their feed suggests, you've still lost because they've got years on you. Years of unrecorded experiments. Years of failures you never saw, where they figured out what didn't work and stopped doing it. While you're studying their current move, they're already 3 moves past it. You're sprinting toward where they were. They're somewhere else entirely. You're playing 2 different games on the same field, and only one of you knows it. And the moment you decided to copy them, the position you actually wanted was already taken. Because the thing you envied was never the output. It was the standing. The sense that they, specifically, are the source of something. That cannot be transferred, it cannot be borrowed. It cannot be earned by being downstream of the person who has it. The leader is the leader by definition, and every imitator, by the same definition, has classified themselves as the other thing. And by the time you've executed their playbook well enough to be competitive, the playbook is dead. This is the part of the timeline that breaks most copyists. They study the move that worked last year, build the skills to do it themselves, finally launch their version, and discover the move stopped working 6 months ago. The leader has pivoted. The trend has broken. The market has moved on. Imitation isn't just structurally weaker than originality. It's structurally late. So stop studying someone else's blueprint and be the blueprint. Stop trying to figure out how to do their thing better. Figure out what your thing is and do it before anyone has the chance to know whether it works. Be the source. Be the one who other people are studying 3 years from now, while you've already moved on to whatever comes next. Create your own lane. Not because it's easier, it isn't, but it's the only lane that's actually yours, and the only lane that has ever produced the thing you say you want. You will spend years getting nothing back. That's the part nobody warns you about, and the part that ends most people before they ever get close. You do the work and the world doesn't move. You do it again and the world doesn't move. You do it for a 3rd year and a 4th, and the silence is so total and so consistent that you start to wonder whether the universe even knows you're there. It does. It just isn't ready to answer. And most of the people who quit don't quit because the work was too hard. They quit because the silence was. Because the silence does something to you the work alone never could. You wake up, you do the thing. You go to bed tired in a way that doesn't feel like accomplishment. And you wake up and do it again, for so long that you lose the ability to tell whether you're being faithful to something real or just stuck in a loop of your own making. You question the vision. You question your judgment. You question whether you were ever the kind of person who could have done this. And the questioning gets louder every year because you've started to suspect the work was never going to pay. That's the moment that breaks almost everyone. Not the work, the doubt. The work is the easy part. The hard part is staying inside the work when the only evidence that it matters is the fact that you keep doing it. And then, on God's timing, not your own, reality bends. It doesn't come gently. It crashes into your life all at once, in a single compressed period that, from the outside, will look to other people like luck. The doors that wouldn't open are open. The people who didn't return your messages are calling. The work you'd started to think was invisible is suddenly the only thing anyone wants to talk about. The thing you'd been quietly working toward for years arrives in a week, in a month, in a season, and your life shifts insanely fast. And the strangest part is that the person standing in that new room is not the person who started the journey. Could not have been. That earlier version of you couldn't have held what's about to be handed to them. You don't get to keep the version of yourself who started this. They had to die so this one could breathe. Most people call this struggle preparation, but it's more like surgery. Every quiet, unwitnessed year was cutting away something in you that couldn't survive what was coming. Every soft assumption, every entitled belief about how fast it should happen, every weakness that would have collapsed under the weight of actually arriving. And most people get off the table, they mistake the knife for cruelty when it was actually love. They feel the cutting, decide that something this painful must mean they're on the wrong path, and abandon the procedure halfway through so they stay intact, soft, untouched, still recognizably themselves. And they spend the rest of their lives wondering why nothing they wanted ever came, and why the people who got there look so different from them now, like they came from somewhere else entirely. They didn't come from anywhere else. They just stayed on the table. Because here's what nobody tells you about the years of getting nothing back. They are not wasted. They are not the universe ignoring you. They are the thing itself. The years are the work. The years are the surgery. The years are the slow, brutal, unsentimental process of becoming the kind of person the thing you want will actually consent to be held by. You don't get to have the result without the becoming, because the result is too big for who you currently are. The years are how you get made big enough to hold it. You think you're waiting for the world to give you the thing. You're not. You're waiting for the part of you that couldn't hold the thing to die. So when reality finally breaks, and it will if you stay on the table long enough, you won't feel like you won. You'll feel like something inside you finally finished. The room that was waiting for you was always waiting. You just had to stop being someone the room couldn't accommodate. That's the whole transaction. The silence wasn't punishment. It was construction. Reality bends to those who stay on the table, because they understood, eventually, that the bending was them, that the years weren't happening to them, they were happening as them. And one day, when the universe gives them what they desire, they don't have to ask why it chose them. It didn't choose them. They became someone it couldn't refuse. You treat discipline as a war against yourself, a daily battle between who you are and who you think you should be. You've been losing for years and you can't figure out why. This is the fundamental error, and it sits underneath every failed attempt at consistency you've ever made. The more you try to force disciplined behavior, the more it evaporates, because you've decided that discipline means becoming someone else entirely, someone who loves 5 a.m. wake-ups, someone who finds joy in deprivation, someone who thrives on restriction. That person isn't you, and you've been trying to install them on top of the person you actually are, and the installation keeps failing. So you build elaborate systems of self-punishment. You monitor yourself obsessively. You shame yourself for every slip. You weaponize guilt against your own progress. And all that surveillance only confirms to you, daily, that you're someone who needs to be surveilled. You're not building discipline. You're sentencing yourself to the identity of someone who lacks it. And then you're surprised when you keep proving the sentence right. Discipline isn't about winning a war against yourself. It's about ending the war entirely. When you approach discipline with a clenched fist, you destroy the very thing you're trying to build. It's like trying to fall asleep by commanding yourself to sleep. The harder you try, the more it escapes you. The people who appear most disciplined aren't thinking about discipline at all. They've created conditions where the right actions feel obvious, natural, inevitable. Real discipline is invisible to the person practicing it. The second mistake cuts deeper. You think discipline is about elimination and restriction, about cutting things out, about saying no to everything. You build your entire self-improvement strategy around what you're going to stop doing, and you spend almost no time thinking about what you're going to start. You obsess over what you need to eliminate, what you need to restrict, what you need to deny yourself, and you give no attention to what you actually want to move toward. This creates a scarcity mindset where discipline feels like deprivation. Your brain interprets severe restriction as a threat. It triggers psychological reactance. You rebel against your own rules. The thing you're trying to stop doing becomes the thing you can't stop thinking about. And every time you tell yourself, I need to be more disciplined, you reinforce the identity of someone who lacks it. Your identity is not your enemy, but when you make it one, you'll lose every time. True discipline isn't about cutting things out, it's about cultivating them. It's about crowding the wrong things out with things that serve you better. You don't need more willpower. You need a life that pulls you in the right direction, not one you have to drag yourself through every day. Genuinely disciplined people don't think of themselves as particularly disciplined. They simply see themselves as people who do certain things because those things matter to them. They've learned that discipline is not about being perfect, it's about being selective. The third mistake is the most destructive, and it's about timeline. You expect linear progress while operating from a fundamental assumption of your own inadequacy. You believe that once you've committed to something, you should maintain perfect consistency immediately and indefinitely. So you start with unrealistic intensity. You hold it through sheer willpower. You crash when life gets complicated, and life always gets complicated. The goal isn't to never fall off track, it's to get really good at getting back on. Instead of recognizing this as normal pattern building, you interpret every slip as personal weakness. You abandon the entire endeavor. You reset to zero and start again from scratch. The cycle repeats. You've done this maybe 100 times. You'll do it 100 more until you understand that the people you envy aren't more consistent than you. They've just stopped treating the falling off as evidence of who they are. They get back on without relitigating the case against themselves because they're not at war with themselves to begin with. So here's the paradox the whole thing rests on, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. True discipline doesn't come from trying to control yourself. It comes from developing such clarity about what you value that aligned actions become expressions of self-care rather than self-control. When discipline stops feeling like discipline and starts feeling like self-respect, you've transcended the paradox entirely. Stop trying to be disciplined. Start being someone who happens to act in disciplined ways. The most sustainably disciplined people in the world don't see their consistent behaviors as evidence of superior willpower. They see them as natural expressions of their values and as care for the future version of themselves. They've stopped fighting. The war they were taught to wage was always optional. They just put the weapons down sooner than the rest of us. Discipline isn't about having an iron will. It's about having a clear reason for why you're doing any of it. Find the reason, and the rest of it stops being a battle. It shifts from a you versus you mentality to you for you mentality. Watch yourself for a second the next time you see someone do the thing you wish you could do. Watch the small thing your mind does. The immediate, automatic move where you reach for the word gifted, or talented, or born for it. Watch how fast it happens. You haven't asked them a single question about their life. You haven't seen the hours, you haven't seen the years, and already your brain has decided they're a different species, built different to you, blessed in a way you weren't. That reflex is the entire trap. That reflex is the thing keeping you exactly where you are. Because here's what the reflex is actually doing. It's not admiration. It looks like admiration, but underneath, it's an alibi. The moment you decide they were born different, the moment you locate the source of their work in some genetic fact you didn't get, you have, in the same instant, let yourself off the hook for the rest of your life. They have something. You don't. That settles it. You can keep watching them, keep loving the work, and never once have to ask the question. Because they were chosen, and you weren't, and you're free. But the freedom is the prison. Follow the logic. If the gift is a myth, mastery isn't reserved. It's available. If mastery is available, the only thing standing between you and the work you envy is the hours. If hours are the only thing standing there, you are the variable. You, your time, your willingness. That's why you reach for the word gifted before you've even thought about it. The alternative ends with you in the mirror, and the alternative is true. The people who built the things you can't stop looking at. The musicians, the writers, the athletes, the craftsmen, the founders, almost without exception, when you ask them how they did it, will tell you the same boring, embarrassing thing. They did it for a long time. They did it badly for years before they did it well. And then they did it 10,000 more times. And the 10,000th time, the thing that used to be impossible was just what they naturally did now. There is a reason this works, and it's not motivational. It's structural. Your brain is the most adaptive object known. It was shaped by an unimaginable run of time, by ancestors who survived because their nervous systems could reorganize themselves around whatever they kept doing. Walking, hunting, language, fire, navigation. None of these were gifts. They were practices. They were the same actions refined across generations and across single lifetimes until the brain physically rearranged itself to be capable of them. You are the inheritor of that machine. You carry inside your skull a system that has been waiting your entire life to do for you exactly what it did for them, to reshape itself around whatever you pointed at for long enough with enough attention. The capacity to become through repetition is the deepest, oldest thing about being human. It is the gift, the only gift, and it was given to everyone, which means the talent myth is not just wrong, it's the most expensive misunderstanding of your life. Because while you've been waiting to find out whether you were one of the chosen, the machine in your head has been working anyway, every single day, on whatever you happen to be doing. Doesn't pause while you decide what you're for. Doesn't wait for you to feel ready. Just builds around whatever you keep repeating. And what you have been repeating, mostly, is consumption. You've been training your brain with the full force of the same mechanism that built the people you envy. To be excellent at scrolling, at half watching, at the small ambient movements of a life on a screen. You are already a master. You have already put in the hours. You just put them somewhere that doesn't compound into anything you'd want to claim. So when you look at someone whose work seems impossible from where you're standing, you're not looking at a different species. You're looking at someone who pointed the same machine you have at one thing and didn't stop. That's the entire gap. It looks magical from the outside because results always look magical. And the process, up close in real time, is just a person doing something slightly boring, slightly badly, slightly better than yesterday for longer than anyone around them was willing to. There is no other version of the story. There has never been another version. Every master you've ever heard of went through the unglamorous middle, alone for years, while the rest of us were calling them gifted to avoid having to do the same. So here's the choice, and it's the only choice. You can be the person who watches or the person who works. You can keep curating your taste for other people's mastery. Keep collecting evidence that you are an appreciator of greatness rather than a candidate for it. Keep telling yourself the comforting story that they had something you didn't. Or you can pick the thing, pick one thing, and then run at it full speed every day for the longest time you have ever sustained anything, and let your brain adapt to this new normal. This is what the 10,000 hours actually means. It is not a punishment. It is not a productivity hack. It is not a number to brag about. It is the offer, the door every master has ever walked through, and the door has never been locked. The gift you were waiting to discover is the brain that has been doing the work since the day you were born. You already have the talent. You have always had the talent. You have just been spending it on the wrong life. Pain equals progress. You believed that, and you weren't wrong, which is exactly how it got you. Because it's true often enough that you stopped checking whether it was true this time. You felt the burn, you felt the cost, you felt the weight of what it took out of you, and you filed all of it under growth without ever once asking what it actually grew. And some of it grew nothing. Some of it has just been bleeding you for years while you stood there looking at the blood as proof you were doing something right. This is the trap. There are two kinds of pain, and from the inside, they are identical. There's the pain of building something, and there's the pain of breaking something, and in the moment, your body cannot tell them apart. Both burn. Both feel like sacrifice. Both leave you emptied at the end of the day, lying there certain you did something hard, so you've been treating them as the same thing. You've been collecting both, stacking up your suffering like it was evidence, as if the amount you hurt told you anything at all about the direction you were heading. It doesn't. The amount you suffer tells you how much you suffered, nothing else. It was never a measurement of progress. It was just a measurement of pain, and this is the move underneath all of it, the one you've never quite caught yourself making. You took the cost of the work and mistook it for the result of the work. They are not the same thing. The cost is what you pay. The result is what you get. And you started treating the paying as if it were the getting, as if handing over enough effort, enough exhaustion, enough hurt automatically meant something was being built on the other end. But effort spent is not the same as something gained. You can pay and pay and pay and walk away with nothing, and the fact that the payment hurt does not mean you bought anything. Most of what you've been proud of is the receipt, not the thing. Because suffering was never a virtue. It's a tool. Think of it like a hammer. It doesn't care whether you're building a house or putting it through a wall. The swing is the same. The force is the same. The strain in your arm is the same. The only thing that's different is where it lands. You can take the exact same intensity, the exact same discipline, the exact same refusal to quit, and point it at something that builds you, or point it at yourself. And from where you're standing, the two look so alike that you've spent years unable to tell which one you're doing. So how do you tell? Not in the moment. The moment lies to you. You find out afterwards, by what's still standing when the pain stops. Discipline leaves something behind. Punishment leaves nothing but the ache and a strange certainty that it still wasn't enough. You finish, and there's no one new standing there, just a tireder version of who you already were, already bracing for the next round, already convinced the problem was that you didn't go hard enough. And that certainty is the tell. When the suffering doesn't transform you, you don't conclude that the suffering was the wrong tool. You conclude that you didn't suffer hard enough. So you reach for more of it, and more of it gives you less because it was never going to give you anything. And you read the shrinking returns as proof you're still not serious, when they're actually proof you've been swinging at a wall and calling the damage a foundation. Erosion always asks for more erosion. It convinces you the answer to a wound is a deeper wound. So you have to actually look, and you have to look at the part that hurts to look at. Take the last year, take all the pain you were proudest of, the pain you'd bring up if someone asked how hard you'd been working, and ask the only question that matters, not was it hard. You know it was hard. Hard was never in doubt. Ask what it built. Ask whether there is a stronger, more capable person standing where you used to stand, or whether there's just the same person, more tired, still bleeding, still telling themselves the bleeding is the point. It really is this simple, and the simplicity is the part people resist, because simple leaves you no room to hide. If the pain is making you better, then the pain is yours, a tool in your hand, and you should pick it up tomorrow without a second of apology. And if it isn't, if you've been hurting for the sake of hurting, calling it discipline because the hurt was the only proof of effort you knew how to recognize, then stop fucking doing it. Not because the work is too hard for you, because you finally understand what the work was for. Suffering isn't the goal. It was never the goal. It's just the price, and you should only ever pay it for something you actually get to keep. There's a particular sickness people don't talk about, and you have it. Most people call it ambition. It isn't just that. It's a parasite that lives in you, that wakes up when you wake up, that follows you into every room, and that has spent your entire adult life making sure you cannot enjoy a single thing you've built. Because here's the lie about ambition. Everyone tells you it's the engine of success, the fuel that gets you to the achievements, the thing that separates the people who do from the people who don't. The actual definition is closer to a curse. The successful people you admire aren't successful because they're more ambitious. They're successful because they were never allowed to feel finished. Every win was a reprieve, not a destination. Every milestone arrived already discounted by the next one. Their lives look, from the outside, like a series of triumphs. From the inside, they're a series of brief, unstable pauses between obligations the rest of the world doesn't even see. And this is where the cursed and the uncursed diverge. You've spent your whole life trying to convince yourself you're not one of us. The uncursed can finish things. They can complete a project, look at it, feel proud of it, and then go and have dinner. They can take a vacation and actually be on vacation. They can hit a goal and let the goal become part of their identity rather than the floor of the next climb. They have what we might call contentment, which is just the technical name for the ability to stop. You don't have that. You've never had it. And every time you've tried to perform it, every time you've tried to relax, to coast, to enjoy the win, your body has rejected it like a wrong organ. You can fake stillness for about a day and a half before the voice comes back, asking whether this is really the ceiling, whether this is really what you're going to settle for, whether you finally confirmed what you've always suspected, that you were always going to come up short. So let's talk about that voice inside you. It's not a thought, it's not a feeling, it's a presence. It's there when you wake up. It's there when you finish something. It's there in the middle of the night when you should be sleeping. And it doesn't speak in the language of encouragement, the way ambition is sold. It speaks in the language of interrogation. It asks whether you actually earned the thing or got lucky. It points at someone younger doing more. It catalogs in detail every place you've slowed down, every hour you've wasted, every advantage you didn't press. And the only time it goes quiet is when you're inside the work, which is why you keep going back to the work, even when the work is destroying you, because the work is the only place the voice can't reach. And this is the part the uncursed cannot understand, which is why you've stopped trying to explain it. They look at your life and see somebody who could stop and chooses not to. They tell you with genuine concern that you should slow down. They tell you that you're working too hard, that you should find balance, that you should prioritize your well-being. They mean it kindly. They are not wrong about the cost. They are utterly wrong about how you're wired, because they think you're choosing this. You're not. Choice would imply that the alternative is available, and the alternative isn't available to you. Slowing down for them is a different gear. For you, it's a void. They have an off switch. You are manufactured without one. Because the cruel thing about this particular wiring is that achievement does not feed it. That's the central misunderstanding everyone makes, and you keep hoping they're wrong. You think, secretly, even now, that if you just get to the next thing, if you just hit the next number, if you just build the next version, the voice will finally rest. It won't. It has never rested for anyone who has it. Ask anyone who's actually arrived at the thing they were chasing. They'll tell you, if they're honest, that the goalposts moved the moment they touched them. Not because they were greedy. The wiring doesn't recognize arrival. Every summit becomes the base camp of the next mountain. Immediately, automatically, with no input from you. You don't get to keep the summit. You don't even get a weekend with it. So why don't you put it down? Why don't you, knowing all this, just decide to want less, to live smaller, to opt out of the curse that's stealing your life? Because you've tried. You've tried multiple times. You've taken the breaks. You've sat across from therapists who told you your drive is trauma-based, that you're trying to outrun something. And maybe they're right. Maybe the wiring did come from somewhere. Somewhere small, somewhere old, somewhere you can't unsee. But knowing where the wiring came from doesn't change the wiring. You've stood at the edge of normal life, looked into it, and known that you couldn't live there. The version of you that wanted less would be a stranger you'd watch with quiet contempt from across the room. So you came back. You always come back. Because the cursed don't get a cure. They get a longer rope. And here's the part you've never said out loud, even to the people closest to you. Because saying it makes you sound insane. You wouldn't trade. Knowing what it costs, knowing the relationships it's strained, the sleep it's stolen, the years of peace you've never had and now know you'll never have. You wouldn't trade. Because somewhere underneath the cost, the curse is also the thing that makes you you. Strip it out, and the person left isn't a calmer version of you. It's a different person. A smaller one, a blander one. Someone who could finish a Sunday without feeling the next week pressing on their chest. You don't want to be that person. You've never wanted to be that person. You just occasionally want a day off from being the one you are, and the curse won't give you that either. So this is the deal you've been making your whole life, even when you didn't have the language for it. You will not get to rest. You will not get to coast. You will work harder than the people around you, and you will not get to enjoy the results. You will reach for something every day of your life until the day you stop being capable of reaching. And on that day, you will be furious at the limits of your own body because the curse will still be running, even when the engine isn't. The promise of ambition, the way it's sold, was never on the table for you. What was on the table was movement, constant, escalating, unconsoling movement. And you took it. You took it because the alternative was a version of yourself you'd rather die than become. You are not crazy, you are not broken, you are not failing at the project of being a normal person. That project was never available to you. There are others like you. You're not alone, but you are also not understood, and you've made your peace with the gap. The curse is not going anywhere. It will outlive your best years. It will be there at the end. The only alternative is to spend your life trying to want less, and you already know that doesn't fucking work. So accept that you are going to die reaching for something, and let the reaching finally be enough. Stop fishing for validation. You're not good enough, and that's the entire fucking point. If you were already the person capable of achieving what you want, you'd already have it, and this gap between where you are and where you want to be is not a problem to solve. It's the game itself. You must simultaneously be your biggest fan and your harshest critic. You must believe you can become extraordinary while knowing you're not there yet. These aren't contradictions. They're what it takes. You don't need to be told you're enough, that you're worthy, that you're ready. The truth is, you'll never measure up to your own standards. Ever. And there's freedom in that, because if you'll never be good enough, then you're liberated from the delusion that you'll ever arrive. There is no arrival. There's only the work, the hunger, to become slightly less inadequate than you were yesterday. You don't find peace in what you are. You find it in what you're building, and the knowledge that you're in pursuit, that you refuse to settle for good enough when you could chase impossible. Still, you'll die incomplete and unfinished, but that's not failure. That's the only life worth living. You were built to create, and you've spent the last decade consuming. That's the reason nothing feels right, no matter how much you optimize the rest of your life. The reason the supplements don't fix it. The therapy doesn't fix it. The routine doesn't fix it. You've been treating the symptom and missing the cause. The problem is that you were designed for one thing, and you've spent your adult life doing the opposite of that thing. Every single day, on a screen, in a chair, with your thumb. You were made in the image of a creator. You have a brain that imagines things that don't exist. You have hands that can build them. You have a voice that can describe what nobody else has seen. No other animal does this. No other species pulls something out of its own head and makes the world contain it. You are the only thing on this planet built for that move, and you've spent your recent years sitting on a couch watching other people do it on a 5-inch screen. That is a betrayal so fundamental that you've stopped being able to see it. It's like being told you've forgotten how to breathe. The loss is so deep you can't perceive it. And the consumption itself isn't the issue. Consumption is fine. Reading is fine. Watching is fine. The problem is the ratio. You scroll through 10,000 pieces of content in a week and don't make one. Your phone has been a one-way valve for years. Things flow in, nothing flows out. And then you wonder why you feel empty, when emptiness is the literal physical state of having taken in without giving back. You're not depressed, you're not anxious, you're starving. And you're starving in the middle of a buffet of the wrong food. Look at what happens when you do create something, even something small, even a sentence, even a drawing, even a chord progression in a voice memo you'll never share with anyone. There's a feeling that arrives that doesn't arrive any other way. It's not euphoria, it's not pride. It's something more subtle than that. It's a sense of having pushed against the world in the only direction the world actually responds to. You feel like a person again. You feel briefly aligned with whatever you actually are. And then you put the thing down, pick the phone back up, and 90 minutes later, the feeling is gone. So you reach for the phone again. So you reach for the next show. So you reach for whatever will fill the space that creation just left empty when you stop doing it. And you've built an entire life around managing that absence, when the absence has one obvious cure that you keep refusing to take. The infinite scroll is a system that asks nothing of you. It asks nothing of you because asking would create resistance. Creating resistance would risk losing you. So it has been engineered deliberately to make sure you never have to do the one thing you were built to do. That's the whole product. You don't have to think, you don't have to commit, you don't have to risk anything, you don't have to be witnessed in the act of trying. You just sit there and let the world wash over you. And the feed keeps the dopamine on a slow drip, and the hours disappear. It's the perfect drug for someone built to create, because it gives you the sensation of input without ever asking for output. And your nervous system, which was built for the asymmetry of input and output, slowly stops being able to function in any other mode. You forget what creation feels like. You forget you have the capacity. You become a viewer of your own life. There is something inside you right now, and you know what it is because it's been there for years, that needs to exist and doesn't yet. A book, a business, a song, a film, a version of something that lives in your head and has never met daylight. You've described it to yourself 1,000 times. You've described it to other people. You've started it and stopped it and started it again. And every day you don't make it real. You are committing a small act of betrayal against your own design. The thing wants out, you won't let it out. And the cost of keeping it inside is exactly the low-level dread you've been trying to medicate with everything except the obvious answer. The obvious answer is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable because creating requires being witnessed in the attempt. And being witnessed in the attempt means risking being judged for it. And being judged for it means risking the discovery that what you made wasn't as good as the version that lived in your head. So you keep the version in your head. The internal version stays perfect forever. The external version never has to face a jury. And in the meantime, you've contracted into a smaller and smaller life because the part of you that was supposed to grow through making things has been atrophying from disuse. Your imagination is weaker than it was at 12. Your willingness to try things in public is weaker than it was at 17. You have systematically untrained yourself out of the only behavior you were built for, and you're surprised that you feel hollow. And nobody is going to extract this from you. There's no career counselor who's going to identify the thing. There's no morning routine that's going to surface it. You already know what it is. You've known for years. The information is not the issue. The execution is the issue. The only person who can do it is you. And the only time you can do it is now, and whatever spare hour you can claim back from the scroll. It has to be today's hour, the one you're about to spend on a screen. Because there is no creator coming to make the thing for you. There is no version of the world in which the thing exists without you putting it there. If the song dies in your head, it dies. If the book never gets written, it doesn't get written by someone else later. It just doesn't exist. You're the only door it has out. And every day you keep it inside, every day you choose absorption over expression, you're making a vote that the universe should be one piece smaller than it could have been. Which is fine if that's the vote you want to cast, but be honest about what you're casting. So put the phone down. Put it down, because every hour you spend with it is an hour you spent consuming a world someone else built. You were made for output. The hollowness is not a mystery, but a diagnosis. And the cure is the thing you've been refusing to do. Stop celebrating the fact that you showed up. Everyone shows up. And most of them are going nowhere, because consistency stopped being a means and started being a brag. It became the destination. It became the thing you tell yourself you're doing when you can't quite point at what you've actually built. And it's the most flattering lie in self-improvement, because it feels like true effort without the actual pain of discomfort. Look at what you actually did this week, not what you planned, not what you scheduled, what you actually did. And then look at what you did last week, and the week before that, and the month before that. If the pattern looks roughly the same workouts at the same weights, same writing sessions of the same length, same conversations on the same topics with the same people, you're not being consistent, you're being comfortable. You found a routine that doesn't challenge anything, and you've been calling it discipline because the word sounds better than the truth. The truth is you're maintaining. The truth is you're loitering. The truth is you're hiding. And the reason it's held up for so long is that you've spent years believing this is what you should be doing. Just show up. Just keep going. Just don't quit. And all of that is true, until it isn't. Consistency is the floor, not the ceiling. It's the price of admission, not the achievement. It keeps you in the game, but staying in the game is not the same thing as winning it. And you stop noticing the difference. You started giving yourself a medal for entering the building. Because here's what's actually happening when you do the same workout you did 6 months ago, at the same weight, for the same number of reps. Your body has already adapted. The work is no longer work. It's maintenance. You're not getting stronger. You're paying rent on the strength you already have, and then walking out of the gym, calling it a session. Same goes with anything. If you've been doing something at the same level of difficulty for 2 years, you're not practicing. You're rehearsing. Rehearsing what you already know how to do is not the same as developing what you don't. And this is the thing about adaptation that nobody mentions. Your nervous system is built to make difficult things easy, which means every time you repeat the exact same effort, you're getting a smaller return. The first time you did the thing, your system adapted to make it less hard. The second time, less again. Eventually, you're putting in effort that produces zero growth and calling that hour part of your discipline. It isn't. It's a habit. Habits and growth are not the same thing. Confuse them long enough, and you'll stay exactly where you are. So what does the real thing look like? It looks like turning up and asking every single time what's slightly harder than what I did last time. Because the only thing that produces growth is operating just past the edge of what you can currently do. And if your routine never goes past that edge, your routine is just an elaborate way of standing still. And the reason most people don't do this is not laziness. It's not lack of information. It's that escalating the demand on yourself is genuinely uncomfortable, and showing up at the same level is comforting. The familiar version of your routine feels like productivity, feels like discipline, it even feels like growth, because you're moving and you're showing up. But the felt sense of doing the work is not the same as the work doing anything. There's a specific moment that happens, if you're paying attention, where the routine stops being practice and starts being performance. The session where you knew, somewhere underneath, that you weren't pushing. The week where you logged the workouts but lowered the intensity without admitting it. The month where you worked every day but only ever on the easy task. You knew in real time that you were performing growth without paying its fucking price. And you let yourself keep performing it because the performance feels like the real thing. But understand this: consistency without escalation is a perfect system for staying exactly where you are. It's the algorithm of comfort dressed up as the algorithm of growth. And it works on you because you want to believe you're moving when you're standing still. Showing up is not the goal. So stop celebrating the fact that you showed up. Start asking what you showed up to. And if the answer is the same thing you showed up to last week, at the same intensity, with the same outcome, congratulations. You've built a routine. You haven't built a future. The streak is meaningless if every entry in it looks the same. Hard work works, just not in the way you think. You've been treating it like a transaction, effort in, result out. And the equation has been broken for years. And underneath all the effort you've already put in, you've started to suspect it. Nobody explains that the work was never producing the result. The work was producing the person who could hold the result. Those are two very different things, and confusing them is why you've been exhausted and disappointed, in roughly equal measure for the last few years. You're treating it like a vending machine, coin in, prize out, when what's actually happening is more like a kiln. The thing being shaped is you. The result, when it comes because you've finally become the kind of person who doesn't repel it. Most of what you've been doing for years has been misframed. You've been counting hours, tracking outputs, measuring effort as if it were a currency you were saving up to spend. But the universe doesn't take that currency. There's no exchange rate. The work isn't a deposit, it's a process, and the process is happening to you, not to the world. You keep checking the world for evidence and missing the evidence happening inside you. Look at the people who got the thing you want. They'll tell you they worked hard, and they did. But if you press them, they don't attribute the result to the volume of work. They attribute it to who they became while doing the work. They'll tell you they were a different person by the time it happened, that they couldn't have held it before. They're not being humble, they're describing the actual mechanism. The hours weren't building inventory. Instead, the hours were building the version of them capable of standing in the room when the thing arrived. And the thing only arrived because that version existed. Reverse the order, and nothing happens. Conviction isn't a feeling you summon. It isn't belief, exactly. It's something slower and more subtle than that. The work isn't trying to convince anyone else. The work is convincing you. Every hour you put in, every failure, every uncomfortable conversation, every revision, none of it is moving the external needle in any direct way. What it's moving is your own internal sense of what's possible. It's slowly recalibrating you until the thing you used to fantasize about becomes the thing you genuinely expect. And the day that flip happens, the day you start expecting it instead of hoping for it, is the day everything changes, because expectation moves you in ways hope never does. Conviction is the residue of doing something for so long that your inner world finally accepts it as normal. So when you put in the hours and nothing visible happens, and you start to wonder if you're wasting your time, you're asking the wrong question. The right question isn't, what has this work produced? The right question is, who has this work produced? Because if the answer to the second question is, someone who used to flinch at this and doesn't anymore, someone who used to need permission and doesn't anymore, someone who used to wonder if they were good enough and has stopped wondering, then the work has done exactly what it was supposed to do. It just hasn't shown you the tangible reward yet. The external arrival is the last thing to happen, not the first. And most people quit in the gap between becoming the person and the world catching up to them. That gap is where everyone gets destroyed. Not by the work, but by the crippling silence. You've put in the hours, so the world should be paying attention. The world isn't paying attention, so you're starting to doubt the work. You're doubting the work, so the only thing that could save you is internal evidence. And internal evidence is exactly what you've stopped looking at. The evidence is hard to see in real time. You don't notice yourself becoming someone different because the change is incremental and you're inside it. The person you were 2 years ago would barely recognize the person sitting where you're sitting right now. But you can't see it because you've been there the whole time. The transformation hides itself from the person it's happening to. So the question isn't whether you're working hard enough. It's whether you understand what hard work is actually for. Stop measuring it against the outcome. The hours aren't an investment with an expected return. Every one of them is shaping the person who will eventually be in the room when the result shows up. And the result shows up because that person is in the room. Not before. Never before. The world doesn't deliver to who you currently are, it delivers to who you've become while no one was paying attention. So keep going. Not because you're owed anything, because you're not. Keep going because the person you're building is the only person who could ever hold the life you actually want. And that person doesn't exist yet. Outcomes are downstream of identity. Hustle culture worships the wrong gods. Discipline, grit, hard work, drive. You've been told these are the qualities you grind into yourself at 5 a.m. until you finally become the person who deserves the life you want. None of it is true. Discipline is not a virtue you cultivate. Grit is not a muscle you build. Drive is not something you summon by listening to the right podcasts. They are residue. They are the dust that gets left behind when something is burning hot enough at the center of someone's life that everything else has to organize itself around it. And every person who tries to acquire them directly, without acquiring the fire first, is going to fail. Not because they're weak, because they're starting in the wrong place. Look at the people who actually have these qualities. The writer who's been at it for 15 years and can't physically stop. The parent who organized their entire life around their kids and would tell you it wasn't a sacrifice. The founder who works hours that would destroy a normal person and seems to be getting more energy from it, not less. You can ask any of them what their discipline routine is, and they'll look at you like you've asked them what their breathing routine is, because they don't have one. They're not disciplined in the way you've been taught to think about discipline. They're just so consumed by what they're doing that the alternative, not doing it, is more painful than the doing. The discipline isn't a force they apply, it's the absence of any meaningful pull in the other direction. And this is where the whole hustle culture industry collapses, because the entire pitch is backwards. They're showing you the exhaust and telling you to build a car out of it. You've been waking up at 5 for 2 years and you still don't know what you're waking up for. You've got the cold plunges, the journals, the supplements. All of it is the visible output of people whose engines are already running. And you're being told that if you just imitate the output hard enough, the engine will appear. It won't. You can't reverse engineer obsession out of behavioral mimicry. You can wake up at 5 for the rest of your life and still be hollow inside the routine, because the routine was never the thing. So why has this lie sold so hard? Because it's the more flattering option. It tells you that the only thing standing between you and the life you want is willpower. That you're a few habit stacks away from becoming someone you respect. That's a comfortable story. It puts the problem inside your control. It lets you believe that you just haven't tried hard enough yet. The harder truth, the one nobody's selling because it doesn't sell, is that you don't have a discipline problem. You have a meaning problem. You haven't found something worth being disciplined about, and you're trying to manufacture the discipline anyway, and the manufacturing is what's exhausting you. And here's the part that's gonna hurt because you've already half noticed it. The people who seem disciplined to you don't think of themselves as disciplined. Ask any of them. They'll tell you they're lazy, that they cut corners, that they don't understand why people think what they do is hard. And they're not being humble. They're being accurate. From the inside, what you're calling their discipline doesn't feel like discipline. It feels like care. It feels like being unable to leave something alone. The only people who experience their lives as a constant grind of forced behavior are the people who haven't found what they actually want to do, and who are trying to manufacture the appearance of caring through sheer behavioral force. You're not doing it wrong. You're doing the wrong fucking thing. So stop trying to become more disciplined. It's the wrong question. The question isn't how to force yourself to do something you clearly don't want to do. The question is why you're forcing yourself in the first place, and what it would look like to stop. Because the relationship between you and the thing you're chasing is the actual variable. Either there's a pull there, in which case the discipline shows up on its own and you stop having to talk about it, or there isn't a pull, in which case no amount of self-flagellation is going to manufacture one. You're trying to force yourself into a thing you don't actually want to be in, and you're calling the resistance you feel a character flaw. It isn't, and finding what you actually care about is harder than the discipline pitch. That's quiet work. It's private work. It's mostly invisible. and it doesn't fit into a morning routine, which is why nobody's gonna teach it to you. It's a process of subtraction, of slowly removing every wrong answer until you're left with something that actually moves you. But it's the only work that matters, because once you find it, the rest of the architecture builds itself. The early mornings happen because you can't sleep. The focus happens because everything else has gone slightly gray. The discipline arrives, fully formed, without you having to learn it, because you finally have something worth being disciplined about. So stop chasing the byproducts. Stop building an identity around the residue of other people's obsessions. Stop performing the aesthetics of effort while the engine underneath stays cold. Find the thing, then watch the rest of it show up exactly as advertised, without you having to manufacture a single ounce of it. Because you don't have a discipline problem, you have a meaning problem, and no amount of waking up early was ever going to solve it. What the fuck do you mean maybe in another life? There is no other life. There's no sequel, no reboot, no version 2 where you're braver and the timing finally works out. There's this. There's the body you're in, and the brain you woke up with, and the circumstances you didn't choose, and that's the entire inventory. You're not waiting for your real life to start. You're inside it, and it's been running the whole time you've been talking about it. You keep a parallel version of yourself alive in your head. The one who would have done it if things were different. Different parents, different timing, different body, different town, different decade, different luck. That imaginary person is braver than you, sharper than you, more disciplined than you, and crucially, they don't exist. They've never done a single thing. They've never made a single phone call. They've never risked a single rejection. And yet somehow, in the accounting of your own life, you keep giving them credit. You keep pointing at them when you fall short. In another life, you say, and what you mean is, spare me the verdict on this one. Every time you were about to do something and didn't, the parallel version did it. They went to the school you didn't apply to. They moved to the city you drove through once and never came back to. They asked the person out. They quit the job the week they realized they hated it. They started the business. They wrote the thing. They sent the message you're still drafting in your head 6 months later. And they walked off into a future you can picture in forensic detail. You know exactly what their apartment looks like. You know what they'd be wearing today. And you've never once asked yourself why the imaginary version of you has so much more specificity than the real one. Because that's what maybe in another life actually is, stripped of its gentle packaging. It's a preemptive alibi. You keep the parallel version alive so you can't be judged against the real one. You can't be judged against the real one because judgment would force a verdict. And you avoid the verdict because you already know what it is. If the real version is hypothetical, it can't fail. It stays perfect forever. You've built yourself an exit hatch out of your own life, and you've been using it every single time things get hard. In another life, it's not a dream, it's an alibi. And it's been working so well for so long that you've started to believe it's just how you talk. If I'd started sooner, once the kids are older, when I've saved enough, when things calm down, every single one of these is the same sentence wearing different shit. They all do the same job. They all outsource the responsibility to a condition that hasn't arrived, might not arrive, and crucially doesn't need to arrive. Because the sentence has already done its work the moment you said it. You've handed yourself a reason. The reason absolves you. And you can go back to your evening without the discomfort of having to look at what you're actually avoiding. You're not making excuses. You're running a script, and the script is designed to keep you exactly where you are. So let's be honest about what you're actually waiting for, because better conditions is a lie you've been repeating without inspecting. You're not waiting for the perfect moment. You're waiting to become a person who isn't scared, and that person is never arriving. Fear is not a bug in the operating system. It is the operating system. Everyone doing the thing you want to do is doing it afraid. The entrepreneurs you admire are afraid. The writers you read are afraid. The people who moved cities and started over and walked away from the wrong life are afraid. The difference is not that they're braver than you. The difference is that they stopped waiting for the fear to leave before they moved. You're still waiting, and you're calling that waiting preparation. It isn't. It's the longest fucking running scam you've ever pulled on yourself. And here's something you probably haven't sat with, because it implicates more than just you. You didn't invent maybe in another life. You inherited it. Someone in your family said it first and said it often, and lived it until the phrase hardened into a lifestyle. It was a father who had the idea but never started the business. A mother who had the voice but never sang outside the kitchen. A grandparent whose whole generation was taught to be grateful for what they had and suspicious of what they wanted. You grew up watching someone use that sentence as a pillow, and you absorbed the pattern before you had the language to refuse it, which means every time you say it, you're not just opting out of your own life. You're continuing a family tradition of opting out. You're the latest person to hold the phrase and do nothing with it. And somebody after you is watching and learning and about to inherit the same sentence you inherited, unless you're the one who finally refuses it. Because this is the only life, not in the spiritual sense, not in the philosophical sense, in the flat, practical, unpoetic sense. This one. The one happening right now in whatever room you're in, with the weather outside and the ache in your back and the faces of the people who will be at your funeral. There is no parallel version being saved for later. There is no draft being perfected in another dimension. There is this life, this brain, this body, these circumstances, and what you do inside the narrow strip of years you've been given. That's the whole offer. Take it or don't. And if you don't, that's fine. That's a choice you're allowed to make. But stop calling it timing. Stop calling it circumstances. Stop calling it the universe not being ready for you. Call it what it is. Call it too afraid to try. Say it out loud. I'm too afraid to try. See how it sounds in your own voice, in your own home, with nobody to impress. Because that sentence, ugly as it is at least honest. And honest is the first thing you have to be before anything real can happen. Everything else is just the parallel life story, running on loop, keeping you comfortable, keeping you small, keeping you waiting for someone who isn't coming. There's only you, right now, in the only life you were ever gonna get. Make it the one you wanted, or admit that you didn't want it enough. Disgust is going to do more for your life than inspiration ever will. You don't want to hear that because you've spent years trying to think positive, visualize better, get motivated, and none of it has moved you an inch from where you were standing 5 years ago. You've been trying to run your life on the wrong fuel. Because the truth is, nobody ever changed their life from a place of mild preference. Nobody climbed out of a hole because they thought it'd be nice to be out of the hole. The people you know who actually turned their lives around, the ones whose before and after doesn't look like the same person, something happened to them first, and the thing that happened was disgust, not inspiration, not clarity. Disgust. They caught a glimpse of where they were headed, and they couldn't stomach another year of it, and the refusal to live one more day inside that version of themselves became stronger than the inertia keeping them there. That's the actual mechanism. And you've been trying to skip it because disgust doesn't feel nice, and you were taught that feeling nice is the point. So let's talk about what you've actually been tolerating. The job you didn't care about when you took it, that now takes up the best 9 hours of your day and leaves you so fucking depleted by the evening that the only decision you're capable of making is what to order and what to scroll. You call that being tired, but it isn't. It's the slow arithmetic of selling your week for a salary and then spending the salary trying to numb the fact that you sold your week. The relationship that used to surprise you and now doesn't. The project you've been almost starting for so long that the phrase almost starting has become your actual personality. These aren't problems. These are tolerations. There's a difference. And the difference is that problems get solved and tolerations get absorbed into the wallpaper of your life until you stop noticing them and just start living inside them. And here's what nobody tells you about tolerating things, because it's uncomfortable. Every small thing you tolerate teaches your nervous system that this is the acceptable level. That the background hum of anxiety is just what being alive feels like. That waking up slightly dreading the day is normal. That checking out for the last 2 hours at work is what work is. You're not just putting up with circumstances, you're training yourself every single day. That this is the ceiling. And then one day you wake up at 35, at 40, at 50, and you wonder why you feel so stuck. And the answer is that you got so good at it that your nervous system now defends the cage. And nobody's coming to lift you out of it. Your parents won't. Your partner won't. Your friends mostly won't, because the people closest to you are usually the most invested in you, staying exactly who they met. You threaten something in them when you change, because you prove it was possible all along, and now they have to ask themselves why they haven't. So they'll comfort you back into the person they recognize. They'll tell you you're being too hard on yourself. They'll tell you you're doing fine. They'll mean it kindly, and it'll still be the most expensive kindness you ever accept. Which is why you can't wait to feel inspired. Inspiration is not going to beat a decade of pretending. The only thing strong enough to break a pattern that deeply installed is the visceral, physical refusal to spend another day inside it. You need to be done. Not thinking about being done. Not planning to be done next quarter. Not journaling about being done. Done. The kind of done where the thought of another Monday, like the last one, makes something in your chest close up. That's your body finally telling you the truth about what it's been enduring. Because the whole peace and light industry has sold you a lie. And the lie is that the positive emotions are the only legitimate ones. That if you're motivated by hatred of your current life, something is wrong with you. That healthy people only move toward beautiful futures. It's nonsense. You're a survival machine. The wiring that kept your ancestors alive was built around avoiding things long before it was built around chasing them. Fear of death, fear of exile, fear of irrelevance. These are the engines that have actually moved people for 100,000 years. And when you refuse to use them, when you insist on only drawing from the gentle end of the emotional spectrum, you're fighting with one hand tied behind your back, and then wondering why the people who seem to move through life with force are outpacing you. You're allowed to hate what you become. You're allowed to look at the version of yourself that's been running your life for the last few years and feel something closer to revulsion than to compassion. Don't confuse this with self-loathing. It's the system working correctly. Self-loathing is passive. It's a fog. It's a feeling that loops in on itself and goes nowhere. Disgust is directional. Disgust says, I am not staying here, and it puts its coat on to walk out of the door. There's a difference, and you've been confusing them because one of them has been sold back to you as the virtue. And running on hatred alone won't work either. Hatred without a destination burns the house down and leaves you standing in the ashes still hating. You need both. You need the clear-eyed vision of the life you refuse to keep living, and you need the equally clear vision of the life you're moving toward. Look hard at the version of the future where nothing changes, the one where you write the same script about yourself in 10 years. Feel it. Let it become unacceptable to you. And then spend the rest of your fuel on delusional optimism, building a future specific enough to actually walk toward, not a vibe, not a mood board, an actual life with actual details that you could describe out loud. The disgust is the ignition, the vision is the steering. So be harder on yourself. There's a version of being easy on yourself that is the single hardest thing you can do to your own life, because it sentences you to 50 more years of the same week on repeat, and you've been calling that self-compassion. It isn't. It's the slowest form of self-abandonment there is. You don't need to wake up motivated tomorrow. You need to wake up unwilling. You've been handed a ladder and you've been pretending you didn't see it. The connection you won't leverage, the face that opens doors you keep walking past, the family name you refuse to claim, the talent you won't unlock because using it feels like cheating. You've built an entire identity around that refusal. You call it integrity, but it isn't. And the story you're telling yourself about it is flattering. The self-made person, the one who didn't take the leg up, the one who'll look in the mirror at the end and know every inch of it, was earned. It's a good story. It's also the most expensive one you've ever told yourself, and you've been paying for it in installments your whole adult life. It starts with a single word, and the word is the tell. You call your own advantages unfair. Think about what that admits, because you've already decided before the conversation has even begun that what you were born with, what you grew up inside, what came to you through no fault or choice of your own, belongs on the other side of some invisible line. There is no such thing as fair. There was never a level starting line that you deviate from when the universe handed you a face or a body or a brain or a surname that opens doors. The game was never fair, and it was never going to be, and the only person who lost when you decided to treat your own inventory as contraband was you. So start with what you've actually been refusing. You're good looking, and you've picked a career where nobody sees your face. You're naturally athletic, and you work a desk job that uses none of it. You've got a family name that would open a door in one industry, so you chose a different industry on purpose. You've got a parent who knows someone, and you're 3 years into trying to do it without the call. You've got a brain that moves faster than the people around you, and you took the safe job where the ceiling was built for someone slower. You had a talent that could have been the center of your life, and you put it in a drawer and went and got a normal one. Every one of those is a tool, every single one, and you're not refusing to use them in the moment. You're refusing to organize your life around them. You picked the room where your advantages don't matter, and then you wondered why you feel average in it. It doesn't look like character when you strip the varnish off. It looks like pride. You wanted to win without the advantages because winning with them wouldn't feel like yours. You wanted it to feel like yours because if you used the ladder, you might find out you were only ever the height of the ladder, and you'd have to live with that. That's what you've actually been avoiding. Not the shortcut, not the compromise, but the information. Because as long as the tools stay in the box, you can keep believing in the version of yourself that would have been unstoppable if only you'd used them. So you stay on the floor and you call it the high road because the high road is the one place where your potential never has to meet the daylight. Here's the part that actually hurts, because while you've been sitting there at the bottom of the ladder, proving a point, the point has been made to no one. Nobody's watching. Nobody's grading you on degree of difficulty. There is no panel of judges tallying up how much help you did or didn't accept. The person whose respect you thought you were earning by doing it the hard way doesn't exist and never did. You invented them so you'd have someone to perform your virtue for. And every single day you keep performing. They keep not showing up. Because the people who actually build something with their lives use every fucking thing they've got. The network, the face, the name, all of it. They know the tools are just tools. And the question was never whether to use them. The question was whether they'd do something worth doing with them. An advantage is neutral. A ladder doesn't make you a better person if you climb it, and it doesn't make you a worse one. What matters is what you build once you're up there. And the people refusing to climb aren't holier than the people climbing. They're just scared of what the view will reveal. So use what you have. Make the call. Say the name. Wear the face. Play the talent. Stop pricing yourself out of your own life to win an argument with a ghost, because the advantages you were handed were never a scandal you needed to atone for. They were just the starting inventory. Everyone gets one. Some get more, some get less, and nobody gets to choose. The only real question is whether you spend your life apologizing for yours, or whether you put them to work on something big enough to deserve them. Because refusing the ladder was never the high road. It was just the long way down. What you've been practicing is disappearing. You didn't know that's what it was at the time, but that's what it was. 1,000 small daily rehearsals and being slightly less than you actually are, stretched over 20 years, until the performance became so fluent you mistook it for your personality. And now you walk through rooms that don't turn, leave conversations nobody remembers, and tell yourself that's fine. That's humility, that's being chill, that's not needing the attention. It isn't. It's the thing you trained for finally arriving. And here's the thing nobody really says out loud. Nobody sits you down when you're 12 and teaches you to be forgettable. You learn it. You learn it slowly over years by watching what got punished and what got laughed at, what made the room tighten and what made the teachers sigh. And somewhere along the way, your nervous system made a deal with itself. It decided that being ignored was safer than being rejected. and it built a version of you that specialized in not provoking a reaction. And now you walk through your adult life wearing the results of that deal. So let's start there. Let's start with what you've actually been doing. You soften your opinions before you share them, so that if someone pushes back, you can say you weren't really committed to it anyway. You laugh at your own ideas before anyone else gets the chance. That way, if they laugh too, it doesn't sting, because technically, you were in on it. You dress one notch below the room because standing out feels like asking for permission. You write messages and then delete the edge before you send them. You walk into a social setting and immediately find the wall. It's 1,000 small daily decisions to be slightly less of yourself than you actually are. And then at the end of the day, you wonder why nobody saw you. But think about what's actually underneath that. Because it's not humility and it's not manners. It's fear. Specifically, it's the fear of being witnessed, not the fear of failing. Because everybody fails, but the fear of someone watching you fail, and the fear of someone watching you try. Because if you try loudly and it doesn't work, there's no escape hatch. You can't pretend you weren't invested. You can't say it wasn't really the thing you wanted. You've been caught wanting something, and wanting something is the most naked a human being gets in public. So instead, you build a life where nobody's really watching. You kept your ambitions small enough to live inside your own head. You told nobody the real plan. You made sure that if you fell in private. And then you got exactly what you engineered. You got a life nobody's watching, and you called it peace. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable, because you have to follow that line all the way down. You wanted to be safe, so you made yourself small. You made yourself small, so nobody really saw you. Nobody really saw you, so nobody really knew you. Nobody knew you, so when you needed to be witnessed, there was no one there. And that absence, that silence, that room that doesn't turn when you walk in, that's the rejection you were trying to avoid in the first place. The thing you built to protect yourself from rejection is rejection. The strategy and the outcome are the same fucking thing wearing different clothes. You've been running from something you were busy constructing. Once you see that, you can't unsee it. Because it means the whole premise was wrong. And every day you keep doing it, you keep agreeing to it. You keep signing the same contract. You keep choosing the forgettable version of yourself, and then grieving the fact that nobody remembers you. You can't have it both ways. You don't get to disappear and be seen at the same time. So this is the part where most people want the tactic. They want the 5-step plan, the morning routine, the thing they can do on Monday that makes them magnetic by Friday. But there isn't one. Because the problem was never behavioral. The problem was identity. You don't become impossible to ignore by adding something. You become impossible to ignore by refusing, finally, to subtract. You stop diluting. You stop pre-apologizing for your own existence. You stop walking into rooms already negotiating how much of yourself is acceptable today. You just arrive fully at the actual density you were built at, and you let the room deal with it. And you already know who you become when you stop. There's a version of you that exists for maybe 20 minutes at a time, usually late, usually after something's cracked open. A conversation that got honest, a night that went somewhere you didn't plan. And in those 20 minutes you stop editing, you say the thing. The room tilts slightly, and something in you recognizes itself. Then you go home, you sleep, and in the morning you pick the costume back up, because the costume is familiar and the other thing is terrifying. Because the other thing is you, uncovered, and there's no one in the room to blame if it doesn't land. So you file the 20 minutes away as a fluke, a good night, a one-off. It wasn't a fluke. The fluke is the other 23 hours and 40 minutes. The fluke is the shrinking. That brief, unedited version wasn't you having a good night. It was you not having to pretend for a while. And look, the people who already move like this, you know them, you've met them, you've been in rooms with them. They're not performing. They're not trying. They've just stopped editing in real time. They've stopped running every thought through the filter of what's acceptable before it reaches their mouth. They've stopped treating their own presence like an imposition they have to apologize for. And that's why rooms reorganize around them. Not because they demanded it, but because they stopped making themselves small enough to be ignored. So this is the thing I want you to carry out of here, because there's no fix, there's no protocol, there's only the recognition. You were not born to blend in with your own life. You were not built at this density by accident. Nobody is given a presence they're supposed to apologize for. And the world isn't walking past you because you're not enough. The world is walking past the version of you that you've been holding up in front of the real one, like a shield you forgot you were carrying. Put the shield down. Not tomorrow, not after the next win, not when you feel ready. Because you're never going to feel ready to be witnessed. And that's the whole point. You put it down now, in the next room you walk into, in the next sentence you don't soften, in the next opinion you don't pre-laugh at. Because you don't become impossible to ignore. You already are. You've just been rehearsing the opposite so long and so well that you forgot what you actually sound like at full volume. And the day you stop rehearsing is the day the rest of the world starts noticing you were here all along. You don't get to be great without being bad first. And not just a little bit bad, I'm talking publicly bad, visibly, undeniably, even humiliatingly bad. The kind of bad that makes people watching you squirm. The kind that makes you squirm. That's where true greatness begins. And that cringe and that flush of shame. There's this common fantasy we have about skill and mastery. It usually goes something like this. You discover your passion, you feel this undeniable calling. You sit down to do the thing. And because it's meant for you, because you're built for this, it just comes naturally. Sure, there's a learning curve, but it's graceful. You struggle beautifully, then you have this breakthrough. The world takes notice, and the story just writes itself. But that's not how it works. It has never worked that way, and the fact that you even half believe it, even just a little in the back of your mind, that's what's holding you back. Because what actually happens is this. You sit down, you try, and you are terrible. Not a bit rough around the edges, terrible or promising, just needs some polish. I mean terrible, terrible. Embarrassingly, objectively, no way to sugarcoat this terrible. And that first raw encounter with your own incompetence is where 90% of people quit, right there at the first contact, because the fantasy promised destiny, and instead, it delivered humiliation. And humiliation is the one thing the human ego just can't stand, so they stop. They rationalize it. Maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I should try something else. Maybe I just need to wait until I'm more ready. But what they're really saying is, I refuse to be bad at something in front of other people. I refuse to be seen learning. I refuse to be the least experienced person in the room. And that refusal is the wedge that separates every truly great person you've ever admired from everyone else who wanted the same thing but never got there. It's not talent or luck. It's the sheer willingness to be utterly, publicly, unapologetically shit at something. For years. Think about anyone you truly respect. Anyone whose work genuinely moves you. Any athlete, artist, builder, writer, speaker. Anyone who operates at a level that seems almost superhuman from the outside. They were terrible once, genuinely terrible, and not for a week, for years. The first time they tried the thing you now admire them for, the thing that looks so effortless now, the thing that seems like it was always a part of them. They were so bad at it, and the distance between that first clumsy attempt and the polished master you see today wasn't closed by talent, but rather endurance. It's the stubborn ability to wake up every single day, confront the fact that you're still not good enough, and do it anyway. And not just do it in public, where people can see, where people can judge, where the chasm between where you are and where you desperately want to be is laid bare for anyone who cares to look. And the hardest truth to accept about all of this is that the gap doesn't close quickly. It doesn't shrink just because you want it to. It closes agonizingly slowly. It feels like you're running in place. It feels like everyone else is flying past you. It feels like you're the only person in the world who's still this bad at something they care so deeply about. And that feeling is precisely what you have to sit with. That's the real work, not just the practice itself. Practice is just mechanics. The true work is tolerating how far you are from your vision and choosing to show up regardless. Most people can't do this. They experience that gap and they interpret it as a sign they're not meant for this, a sign they started too late, a sign that talent is something you're born with, and they just weren't born with enough. So they quit, they just stop showing up. And the world never even notices because the world is full of people who stop showing up, and nobody keeps track of the ones who leave, only the ones who stay. Let me tell you what it actually feels like, because I think this whole journey gets romanticized, and I want to strip that away completely. It feels like shame. It feels like posting something you poured hours into, only to watch it get zero response. Not negative comments, just zero. Like the world just glanced at it and shrugged, which honestly is almost worse than being criticized because at least criticism means someone noticed. Silence means you're invisible, and being invisible at something you care about is a very particular kind of pain that no one talks about because it's not dramatic enough for a story. It's just quiet and heavy, and it settles on your chest every single time you try again. It feels like being in a room with people who are undeniably better than you, and knowing deep down that everyone else can see the difference, that you're the weakest link, that your work doesn't belong next to theirs, and then staying in that room, sitting with that uncomfortable knowledge, not leaving or making an excuse, staying and learning, and allowing yourself to be the worst because the worst person in the room is still in the room. It feels like cringing at your own output, looking at something you made and physically recoiling because it's so far from what you imagined, the canyon-sized gap between what your taste recognizes as great and what your current skill can actually produce. You're standing at the edge of that canyon every time you create something, and you have to jump anyway, knowing you'll fall, knowing it won't be good, knowing the only way across is through 1,000 failed attempts. It's what the early years of anything truly worthwhile feel like. And if anyone tells you otherwise, if someone tries to sell you a version of mastery that skips this brutal part, they are lying to you. There is no skip button. There is no shortcut. There is no hack, no course, no framework that lets you bypass the degrading, humiliating middle ground where you are objectively terrible at the thing you love. The middle ground is where the real transformation happens, and that's the cruel irony. The very part that feels like undeniable proof you should just give up is actually the thing that's shaping you into a master. Because what happens in that phase is that the skill stops being a task. It stops being something you do and starts being something you are. It merges with your very identity. It becomes the lens through which you see the world, the way you think, the way you process everything around you. And that merge, the shift from doing to being, it only happens through a kind of repetition that most people would consider insane. Years of it. Years of showing up when it feels like nothing's working. Years of producing things that don't even meet your own standards. Years of being bad enough that quitting would make perfect sense. And then, at some unpredictable point, you can't force it, you can't rush it, you can't engineer it. Something just shifts. The thing that used to demand every ounce of your concentration starts to flow. The thing that felt like translating from a foreign language suddenly feels like your native tongue. You stop thinking about the mechanics, you stop wrestling with the basics. They're just there, solid beneath you, like a floor you forgot you built because you laid it one board at a time, over so many years, that you never even noticed it becoming stable. That's mastery. And it looks effortless from the outside because all the effort happened where no one was watching, in the shame, and the silence, and the cringe, in those 1,000 moments where you looked at your own work and wanted to burn it, but you didn't. So the question isn't, am I talented enough? It was never about that. The real question is, can you watch yourself fail and say, again, instead of never mind? Can you create something truly terrible and still claim the identity? Can you be a bad writer who writes, a bad musician who plays, a bad entrepreneur who ships? Can you hold on to that identity before you've earned it, knowing full well you haven't earned it yet and keep showing up under the crushing weight of that contradiction? Because that's the whole game. Not the talent, not the timing, not the resources. It's the sheer, stubborn willingness to be publicly, repeatedly, embarrassingly bad at something, long enough for the bad to become good, and then for the good to become great, and then for the great to become so deeply ingrained in you that people look at you and say, they make it look easy, and they have absolutely no idea what it truly cost. That's the price. and you pay it in shame, and it's worth it every single time. There are only two things that truly matter: waking up with a spark, falling asleep with a quiet mind. That's the whole game. Every philosophy, every faith, every self-help book you've ever picked up and put down, they're all circling these two poles: the dawn and the dusk, the fire and the calm. Everything else is noise, and most of us are drowning in it. You're not waking up thrilled. You're not drifting off peacefully. You're stuck in the middle, just getting by, just surviving, playing a part that looks right from the outside but feels hollow on the inside. And you've been stuck there for years. Someone handed you a script. Around 18, 19, 20, the world laid out a checklist and said, here's what a good life looks like. Follow these steps. Get a decent job, earn a steady paycheck, buy a place, get a car, find a partner, save a little, take 2 holidays a year, retire before your body gives out. And you followed it. You checked the boxes, and each check mark gave you a little hit. A fleeting chemical rush that made you think you were building something real. Then it faded. So you needed another box, and another, and here you are now. Deep into a life that makes perfect sense on paper, but keeps you wide awake at 3 a.m., wondering what it all means. Because no one, not once in this whole process, bothered to ask you the only 2 questions that actually count. Does this make you eager to start your day? Does this allow you to rest easy at night? No one asked. Your parents didn't ask because they were reading from the same script. Your teachers didn't ask because their job was to prepare you for that script. Your boss doesn't ask because your predictability is their comfort, so no one asked. And you never asked yourself because you were too busy chasing check marks to notice you were slowly losing yourself behind the score. That's what a comfortable life does. It doesn't kill you outright, it sedates you. You stop feeling the sharp pains, but you also stop feeling everything else. And you mistake that dullness for stability. You call it being practical. You call it growing up. You call it just how life is. No, this is just how your life is because you chose the script over your inner compass. Your compass is simple, almost embarrassingly so. 2 questions. Every single decision you face, and I mean every single one, gets filtered through them. Does this get you excited in the morning? Does this bring peace at night? If the answer is yes, protect it. Build your world around it. Prioritize it above everything that doesn't pass this test. If the answer is no, cut it out. Ruthlessly, not let's reconsider, not let's set some boundaries. Kill it. Remove it from your life with the same urgency you'd remove a tumor. Because that's what it is. It's something growing within your days that serves nothing but its own existence. The job you dread but tolerate is a tumor. The relationship you cling to out of obligation is a tumor. The habits, the duties, the unspoken agreements you made when you were a different person with different values. All of it, tumors. And you're walking around riddled with them, wondering why you constantly feel unwell. Now, some of you will hear this and think I'm being extreme. It should feel extreme, because the alternative, the balanced, measured, reasonable approach, is precisely what led you here. So yes, I am being extreme, because the moderate version of your life is the one you can't stand living. And this compass doesn't make things easy. I'm not pretending that filtering your entire existence through 2 questions is painless. It's not. It's brutal. It means looking at things you've spent years building and admitting they don't measure up. That's not a fun time, but it offers clarity, and clarity is what you're missing. You're not struggling because life is inherently hard. You're struggling because you don't know what the hell you're doing. You're just doing it faster. You're optimizing a prison. The compass stops that. It doesn't make the climb less steep. It just makes sure you're climbing the right mountain. Now, let's tackle the excuses, because I can already feel them forming in your mind. But it pays well, right? And what are you actually buying with that money? What's the real purchase? A slightly nicer version of the thing that's draining you. A more comfortable cage. Vacations to recover from the life you return to. You're earning money to treat the symptoms of a disease you could simply choose to eliminate. But they need me. No. They rely on you. There's a crucial difference. Needing and relying are not the same. And you've blurred the lines because being relied upon feels like purpose. And purpose is what you're truly craving. So you feed that hunger with other people's dependence and call it meaning. But it's not meaning. It's avoidance. Because the moment you stop being indispensable to everyone else, you're forced to confront what you need. And that's the conversation you've been running from. But I've already invested so much. Sunk cost. Every single day you remain in something because of what you've already poured into it. You're not honoring the past, you're punishing the future. Those years are gone. They're gone whether you stay or leave. You don't get them back by losing more. And you know this. Logically, you know this. But logic isn't what's holding you there. Fear is. The fear that if you walk away from something you gave 10 years to, those 10 years were meaningless. And that thought is so unbearable that you'd rather give it 10 more years than face it. Every one of these excuses shares the same core. They all say, my life is not mine to control. That's the lie beneath it all. That's the hidden operating system running in the background, and until you uninstall it, until you look it directly in the eye and name it for what it is, nothing will change. I'm not telling you to blow up your life tomorrow. What I am telling you is to get honest. Not with anyone else, but with yourself. Tomorrow morning when the alarm sounds, before you grab your phone, before you open an email, before the world tells you who to be, ask yourself, am I excited? Not just content, not just fine, not, it could be worse. Genuinely excited. Is there something pulling me into this new day? And tomorrow night, when you lie down and the world goes quiet, ask yourself, am I at peace? Not just tired, not just distracted, not numbed into unconsciousness by a screen. At peace, as if the day truly mattered, as if I spent it on something that was genuinely mine. And if the answer is no, which for most of you it will be, then something has to shift. Not everything, just one thing. Maybe it's the job, maybe it's the city, maybe it's a relationship, or maybe it's something smaller. The way you spend your evenings, the content you consume, the energy you give to people who offer nothing in return. I don't know what it is for you. Only you can know. And you've probably known for a while, you just haven't touched it because touching it means admitting you built something that isn't working. And that admission feels like failure. But it isn't failure. It'll be the most honest thing you've done in years. You already know what you want. You've known for years. You think about it in the shower, you think about it on the drive home, you think about it at 2 a.m. when you can't sleep, and the ceiling reminds you of every version of your life you haven't built yet. You know exactly what you want, you just haven't taken it. And that word, taken, is going to bother some of you. Good, it should, because that discomfort is the entire problem. We are raised on a lie, a comfortable, democratic, well-meaning lie that sounds like this. If you work hard, good things will happen. No, they won't. Not automatically or inevitably. Not because the universe is keeping score. And I think the reason that lie sticks around is because it's useful, right? It's useful for keeping people docile. It's useful for keeping people patient. Just wait your turn. Just put your head down. Just be a good person, and eventually, the world will notice. The world does not notice. The world does not care about your potential. It doesn't care about your dreams. It doesn't care that you'd be really, really good at something if somebody just gave you the chance. Nobody's giving you the chance. I need you to actually sit with that for a second. Nobody is coming. There's no talent scout. There's no lucky break that arrives because you deserve it. That's a fictional story. And most people are living inside this fictional childlike story and wondering why their adult life feels like it's going nowhere. The world operates on force, on who takes and who waits. You know this already. You've watched it happen. You've watched people less talented than you, less intelligent than you, less capable than you, walk into rooms and take things that you were too polite to reach for, too careful, too strategic. And you told yourself, my time will come. No, it won't. Not like that. Because the gap between where you are and where you want to be is not a knowledge gap. It's not a talent gap. It's not even a resource gap. It's a violence gap. And I don't mean violence against others. I mean violence against your own comfort, against your own hesitation, against every version of yourself that has made peace with less. You don't get what you deserve. You get what you take. And the sooner you stop waiting for permission, the sooner your life actually begins. Let me describe someone you know, maybe someone you are. And if this is you, don't get defensive. Just listen. They want to build a business. They've bought the courses. They've read the books. They follow the right accounts. They have a notes app full of ideas and a bookmarks folder full of inspiration. They've got the language down. They can talk about funnels and branding and market positioning like they've been doing it for a decade. They want it badly. Yet they have done absolutely nothing that costs them anything. That's the bit. That's the test. Not, do you want it? Everybody wants it. Walk outside right now. Stop any stranger on the street. Ask them if they want to be rich, if they want to be free, if they want to wake up excited about their life. They'll say yes. Everybody says yes. Wanting is the most common thing on earth. It is the cheapest, most abundant thing that exists. The test is, what have you sacrificed for it? What have you cut? What have you burned? What did you use to enjoy that you no longer allow yourself because it sits between you and the thing? Because if the answer is nothing, if your life looks exactly the same as it did 6 months ago, then you don't want it. You like the idea of it, and those are very, very different things. Wanting is not a strategy. You don't get what you want by wanting it. You get it by becoming the kind of person who refuses to exist without it. And that's a total restructuring, a demolition of what was for what is. You need to be looking at how you spend your hours, who you spend them with, what you tolerate, what you consume, what you let slide, and tearing it apart, all of it, and rebuilding it around one thing. Now here's where I lose people, and I'm fine with that, because when I say sacrifice everything that doesn't serve it, most people hear extremism. They hear toxicity. They hear some lunatic telling them to abandon their family and sleep on an office floor. And no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is simpler and honestly harder. Look at your day, your actual day. The screen time, the scrolling that starts as 5 minutes and ends as an hour and a half of watching other people live the life you want. Now ask yourself, how much of that day belongs to the thing you say you want? An hour? 30 minutes? Nothing. Because whatever time you're not giving to it, you're giving to something else. And that something else is the sacrifice. You're already sacrificing every single day. You're just sacrificing the wrong thing. You're sacrificing your future for your comfort. You're sacrificing the life you want for the life that requires nothing from you. And I think that's the part that really hurts people. Because it's not that you're not sacrificing. You're sacrificing the thing that matters most. And you're doing so passively, you don't even realize you're doing it. The equation doesn't change. Something always gets cut. The only question is whether you're choosing what gets cut or letting the default choose for you. And most people let the default win every single day of their life and then wonder why nothing changes. So what does it actually look like to restructure everything around a singular obsession? And I want to be honest with you here because I think there's this mythology around ambition that makes it look cinematic. Like you'll feel inspired every morning, and the grind will have this noble, beautiful energy to it. It doesn't. It looks boring. I need you to know that. It looks repetitive and unglamorous and deeply lonely at times. You're working while the world is still asleep, and nobody knows, and nobody cares, and nobody's clapping. It's someone asking, what do you do for fun? And realizing the answer is the work, and watching their face when you say that, and knowing they think something's wrong with you. Same hours and same days, same relentless grinding repetition, day after day after day, until the gap between who you are and who you need to be starts to close. And it does close, slowly, painfully slowly, but it eventually closes. And people will watch you do this and call you obsessed. They'll call you antisocial. They'll say you've changed, and they'll say it like an accusation, like changing is a betrayal. You have changed. That's the point. You were supposed to change. The old version of you was compatible with the old life. I think people get stuck here because they want the new results with the old identity. They want the new life, but they want to be the same person inside it. And it doesn't work like that. It has never worked like that. The new life requires a new person. So you cannot drag yesterday's identity into tomorrow's ambition and expect it to fit. It'll tear at the seams, and you'll end up right back where you started, wondering what went wrong. When what went wrong is that you changed everything except yourself. So let me leave you with this. Nothing is out of reach. I didn't say nothing is difficult. I didn't say nothing requires suffering. I said nothing is out of reach, because out of reach implies a ceiling, a wall you cannot climb no matter how hard you try. And that is almost never true. What's true is that the climb is longer, steeper, and more painful than you expected. What's true is that most people stop climbing, not because they've hit a wall, but because they got tired and decided the view from a couple of steps up was good enough. It wasn't good enough. You know that. You've been standing at this point for months, maybe years, telling yourself the altitude is fine, telling yourself this is close enough, and some part of you knows it isn't. Whatever you want, and the business, the body, the freedom, the family, the life that makes you feel something when you wake up, it exists. It's real. It's waiting, but it's not going to come to you. You're going to have to go and take it, with force, with focus, with a kind of terrifying singular commitment that most people will never understand. But that's fine, because it was never meant for most people. You will never master anything. Not because you're not talented, not because you started too late. You will never master anything because you refuse to drown. You keep one foot in and one foot out. And you call that trying. But that's not trying. That's half-assing. Somewhere along the way, somebody sold you the idea that balance is the key. Work a little, rest a lot, honor your boundaries. And look, rest matters. Sleep is non-negotiable. I'll get to that. But here's the thing nobody tells you. Every single person you admire, every artist, every athlete, every builder who made something that outlived them, they were not balanced. They were consumed. There's a difference between living a balanced life and hiding behind the word balance because the alternative terrifies you. Balance is a beautiful thing. For maintenance. For keeping what you already have, but building something from nothing, creating mastery where there was emptiness, that requires imbalance. Deliberate, violent, unapologetic imbalance. You don't become world-class at anything by giving it a reasonable amount of attention. Mastery starts with drowning, total, fucking, immersion. No half measures, no casual interest, no I'll get to it when I feel inspired. Inspiration is a tourist, and obsession is a resident. You must practice until your hands bleed. And I don't mean that to sound dramatic. It's just the truth. It's schedule, Monday through Sunday, morning through night. You practice the thing. You study the thing. You strategize about the thing. You dissect other people who've done the thing. You pull it apart like an engine on a garage floor, and you figure out why every single piece exists. When you're not doing the work, you're consuming the work. When you're not consuming the work, you're thinking about the work. When you're not thinking about the work, you're sleeping, still probably dreaming about the work. And right now, some of you are hearing this and thinking, that's not sustainable. Correct. It's not meant to be sustainable. It's meant to be transformative. Those are two very different words. Sustainability is for systems. Transformation is for seasons. And the season of mastery, the early season, one that separates masters from hobbyists, demands everything. Let me tell you what's really going on. You're not afraid of burnout. You're afraid of finding out you gave everything, and it still wasn't enough. That's the real fear, not exhaustion or insignificance. Because right now, you have a beautiful excuse. I haven't really tried yet. That sentence is a parachute that lets you fall without impact. You get to sit in mediocrity and tell yourself you chose it. But the moment you go all in, truly all in, You lose that story. You lose the safety net. If you drown in it completely and still come up short, what then? Who are you then? And that question is so terrifying that most people will spend their entire lives avoiding it. They'll call it keeping options open. They'll call it being realistic. They'll call it self-care. They'll call it anything except what it actually is: cowardice. Now, I said rest matters, and I meant it. There is a fragile line, a whisper of sanity that demands sleep. You will honor it, not because you want to, but because the machine breaks without it. You sleep, you eat, you move your body enough that it continues to function. These are not luxuries. These are maintenance costs, the tax on being alive. But do not confuse maintenance with moderation. You're not taking it easy. You're recharging so you can go back to getting it done. The sleep is not the point. The waking up is the point. And what you do the second your eyes open, that's where mastery lives or dies. Most people wake up and check what the world wants from them. Emails, notifications, other people's agendas. The master wakes up and lets their obsession consume them. Before the world has a chance to speak, they've already started. They've already moved. They've already chosen the day instead of letting the day choose them. So here's what I'm telling you. Stop managing your ambition. Stop scheduling it into a neat little box between your morning coffee and your evening scroll. Stop treating mastery like a hobby that fits around your comfort. Let it consume you. Let it take over your conversations. Let it take over your friendships. Let it rearrange your priorities without your permission. Let it make you unreasonable, inconvenient, difficult to understand. Because that's the price. Mastery doesn't ask you to be likable. It asks you to be relentless. And the people around you will not understand. They will call you obsessed. They will call you unhealthy. They will call you too much, like there's a correct amount. There isn't. The correct amount is all of it. There's something you've been avoiding. The email, the conversation, the call you keep not making. It's small. It would take an afternoon, maybe less. And it has been sitting on you like something enormous for weeks. Because you misunderstood what avoidance actually does, and the misunderstanding is costing you more than the thing you're avoiding ever could. Here's what you think is happening. You think the thing is waiting somewhere outside you on a list, sitting still, costing you nothing, until the day you finally deal with it. So putting it off feels free. It feels like rest. You push it to tomorrow, and you get a small hit of relief. And your mind files that relief as a reward, so you do it again and again. And you call the whole pattern taking a break, but it isn't a break. Nothing was set down, and the thing didn't go anywhere when you looked away from it. It just went inward. Because an unfinished thing doesn't wait out there in the world. It moves into your head and it stays open, and it keeps running. It's there in the shower, and at the edge of sleep, and it surfaces in the middle of something good and pulls you halfway out of it. You thought you were free of it because you weren't looking at it, but it doesn't need you to look at it to keep taking from you. It draws on you quietly, in the background, taking its cut of your attention before you get to spend any of it on the life that's actually in front of you. That's what avoidance really is. It's not a thing you just put down. It's a thing you leave running, and it never runs alone. You leave one thing unfinished so you get used to the weight of it. You get used to the weight so you stop noticing it. You stop noticing it so you never close it. And it's still there, still pulling, when the next one opens, and the one after that, until you're carrying a dozen of them at once. None heavy enough to name on its own. All of them dragging. That low background pull you live with. The sense that you're always slightly behind and never quite landed, never fully at rest, even on the days when nothing is actually wrong. That's the weight of everything you've left unfinished, all of it bearing down at the same time, and you've spent so long under it that you've mistaken it for normal. The tasks were never the heavy part. Holding them was. You just couldn't feel the weight of it until you put one down, which is exactly why the relief at the end is always so disproportionate. You handle the thing you dreaded for 3 weeks, It takes 20 minutes, and what you feel afterward isn't satisfaction, it's release. That strange lightness, like setting down a bag you'd been holding so long you forgot it was in your hand. So the whole thing was backwards. You avoided the task to spare yourself the hard part, but the avoiding was the hard part. Doing it costs you an afternoon once. Avoiding it costs you a little every single day, indefinitely, until you do it anyway. And you were always going to do it anyway. So you didn't escape the afternoon. You just chose to carry the dread alongside it, the whole way there. You didn't make it lighter. You made it longer. And you'll keep making it longer because the resistance you feel swears the thing will be worse than it is. And the resistance is lying, and it lies to you every single time. So here's the thing you actually need to understand, and it's bigger than whatever you're avoiding right now. You've been treating avoidance as something you do to protect yourself. It has only ever been something being done to you, by you, on a loop you forgot you started. The task is not your problem. The task is an afternoon. The avoiding is the thing that's been bleeding you every hour for as long as you've kept it running. So close it. Not the dozen or the whole backlog at once, because that's just a bigger thing to avoid. Just one. The one you thought of in the first few seconds of this. Walk toward it today. Do it badly if you have to. And pay attention to the half second right after it's done, when the pulling stops and something in the background goes quiet and you get back a piece of yourself you didn't know you'd handed over. Because the reality is you were never choosing whether to do the thing. You were always going to do it eventually. You were only ever choosing how long to be haunted by it first. You made the ghost the day you looked away from it. You end it the moment you turn around, look at it, and just do the thing.